Welcome to Driving Change, the By Mile podcast series. If you've not heard of us, we are pioneers in pay-by-mile car insurance. Now, if you're not a car insurance nerd, don't worry. The podcast isn't really about that. Well, not entirely anyway. We're more talking about the issues impacting drivers, and this time around we're going to be talking about the cost of living crisis, what that means for drivers now and how it might impact them in the future. With me to discuss this, I have Faith, who's Head of Customer Experience.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely no problem. And we've also got Kirsty, Head of Product.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. Last time round, and if you haven't checked out the previous episode, absolutely do so. We kind of talked about the lowering mileage of the drivers in the UK, both commuting and kind of personal mileage as well, the kind of impacts that had, the kind of cultural changes for that. What we're kind of discussing around this way is more kind of financial aspects of it. And I think there's a lot kind of going on, starting with the rising inflation and concerns drivers have that kind of suggests that this lower mileage trend isn't just going to be a blip, Faith, is it?
Absolutely. We're definitely seeing that trend downwards post-pandemic, and then, of course, in the time that we are right now. And things like the cost of living crisis and inflation overall are massively impacting the decisions that drivers are making to save themselves some money. I don't think this is going anywhere. I think this is definitely a new norm, as we'd say.
Yeah. I've got a stat here, Casey, saying that 80% of people, not just drivers, 80% of people are actually actively looking to save money. And I guess driving is, one of the first things people look at for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've actually seen 78%, as you say, of drivers take active steps to cut their driving costs in a post-pandemic world. And there are certain demographics that are even more acutely affected by this. For example, if you look at the under 35, so Gen Z and millennials, this jumps up to more like 84%. So people are taking action to cut their driving costs and really changing behaviour.
So how are people still getting about them? Because for some people it's just not as easy as just not picking up the car keys. People still need to get somewhere. People need to get to work. People need to do the school run, things like that. So what kind of options have people got now to still do what they need to do?
Well, there's more and more options available all the time. So absolutely, people are still driving, and I think actually the convenience of having a car but just choosing when to use it is something we're seeing more and more with our own kind of customer and member base. So people are driving but less on average. People are turning to alternative transport methods, so especially methods that are kind of affordable, green, and really convenient through like not having to actually own a vehicle. So we look at the cars that you can rent, e-scooters, electric bikes, all of that, the rise in public transport as well, and actually what you see is kind of the younger generation are leading the way on this. And the general trend that you see is much more acutely kind of noticeable within millennials and Gen Z as a demographic.
I think we did discuss last time this kind of change and this kind of big behaviours and how sustainability is linked in with this younger generation for it all. And is it fair to say that there's almost a kind of correlation between with these greener types of transport like biking and the cost of them? Obviously, the cost to entry for getting a bike and getting around on a bike is a fraction of what driving is. Do you think that drives a lot, no pun intended, a lot of this kind of behaviour for it all, or is it down to price, or is it down to kind of these green sustainability ethos, I guess, the younger generation's got?
It's a myriad of factors, of course, but price is the most important decision factor when you're making a decision around, definitely around buying car insurance, for example. But yeah, price is the most important thing, and in the cost of living crisis that we're experiencing at the moment, people cannot afford to just keep driving as they were, even a few months ago. And actually, it's up to companies like car insurers and kind of transport providers in general to step up to this, to recognise this, and to innovate and create more affordable transport options for people.
We've seen a lot of transformative work in city centres at the moment for Faith, aren't we? So a lot of city centres have increased the cycle lanes. and certainly into some of the cities I've been to, they've even kind of shut off a lot of what was car-based stuff and been better pedestrianised. Do we think this is just going to be the norm in that? What city centre is going to look like in, say, 10, 15 years' time? Are the thought of cars in the city centre going to be strange for our children to grow up and see, you think?
Absolutely. And I think, well, we with each passing generation, we all get more and more accustomed to change. So I think one thing that's really exciting is that it probably won't be strange to them. They will have seen and, you know, kind of experienced it all, especially as it's coming to be. But if I think about my nephews, they're never without a scooter. So I don't see much of that changing as they grow older, and understanding that there's a myriad of choices when you would like to get around, some of them more expensive than others. Of course, we know that car insurers and, you know, insurance providers need to start thinking about driving down that barrier to entry, as you mentioned, and making it so that you can more affordably and more accessibly use insurance in a flexible way. Absolutely. But as infrastructure grows to support cycling and different ways of getting around, walkable cities are a huge part of kind of what helps society as a whole remain healthier, the air remain greener, as Kirsty's mentioned. But also I know that, you know, in terms of longevity and the way that we get to connect and interact with one another, it's a massive benefit. So I know it's a really, really tough thing as we see things like ULEZ zones increasing and congestion charging zones increasing. But with each one of these steps, drivers adjust, drivers make different decisions, and we're seeing overall that impacting the mileage that they're doing and the decisions that they're making in terms of mobility and getting around. So I think it is really, really exciting. And I really, really look forward to seeing what those cities of the future look like when you get, you know, walking, driving, cycling, scooting, all of that, you know. And of course, we're talking about accessible vehicles as well, and options for people that are less mobile that can still give them the ability to access cities in a way that's comfortable for them. It really is an exciting version of the future. And I think, yeah, everybody needs to make sure that they're paying attention and adjusting to that new norm as it's coming, and coming quickly.
It sounds like there's a lot of other options now that people are getting about, and they're just going to increase. There's probably even things that we haven't even thought about or worked out yet. But I just want to go back to something you said earlier, Kirsty, about the cost of driving now is probably even more than what it was 3, 6, 9 months ago. I mean, none of us are economists, but we don't know how this is going to look over the next 3, 6, 9 months. I mean, do we think that, and especially with what Faith was just saying about all the different options we've got, do we think that we're going to price a generation out of driving completely?
It's an interesting way of looking at it. I think the younger generation absolutely are driving less, and price is a big factor in that. I hope we don't price a whole generation out of driving, because you know, some people do need to drive, and you mentioned people with different accessibility needs. So we should make sure that driving is still available to people when they need it. And actually, I think it's the responsibility of people setting regulation to not do that, and to adapt and innovate our products and services so that they are more affordable and do meet customers' needs. And I think there's a huge opportunity to do that right now, and we're seeing so much innovation within transport, insurance, people innovating to meet the changing needs of customers.
That's very interesting, because what we just described, especially how city centres look, it still doesn't kind of answer the question what you were saying, the necessity for people driving, especially longer distances. Especially, you know, we did discuss in the last episode about staycations and things like that. People are still going to be taking these. So I guess, do you feel like there is an emphasis or an onus or responsibility for the governments and the people who kind of incentivise these things to, you know, like you say, keep people driving and keep those options open for people?
Yeah, I do. I think we should absolutely be leaning towards as many green options as possible. And, you know, I think that's why there's been such a drive towards electric vehicles, because that allows kind of people to drive when they need to, but without having that same environmental impact. And electric vehicles are becoming more and more, affordable, with different sort of lease schemes, and also different models. Not just, you know, it's not just Teslas anymore. You can get more affordable electric vehicles that kind of meet everybody's needs.
So with people still needing cars, are still using cars, things like that. So insurance will still be something that is needed by every single driver. Now I think we saw over the pandemic, premiums were going down, which was good news for everyone, absolutely. But now we're kind of seeing them creeping back up again, and I guess there's many different factors to that. But are there any particular things that jump out as to, I guess, why?
Absolutely. I think something that we're seeing impact insurance premiums on a whole. We've seen a massive amount of inflation across the board, but claims inflation specifically has been something that's definitely impacted premiums. Now we know supply chain issues that have hit across the pandemic, of course, and since then that plays a massive role in the ease of getting parts and the speed to which we can get your car back on the road, which again inflates the cost of your overall claim. We had the microchip shortage, and with cars getting smarter and with you essentially driving a little computer every time you get out into your car, that means that we are really, really reliant on some of these key parts. Palladium, which is often it's a core component in a catalytic converter. So a lot of these vehicles that are more hybrid use that and very much rely on that to get around. The price of that as a precious metal has massively increased. So it's kind of like loads of small things that are overall impacting the value of claims, the cost of claims, and therefore the costs of premiums. And it is a really, really tough thing to see, of course, compounded by the fact that we're seeing, energy prices increase, we're seeing food prices increase. It's a really, really tough pill to swallow to understand as well. Well, so are the costs of claims, and that's hitting your pocket as well, which is why many, many drivers are making decisions to where they can take that into their hands, take control back, and of course, seek options that can mean they can cut some of those prices where they can, whether it is choosing alternative payment methods, whether it's, going from paying yearly to potentially spreading that cost across the year, potentially, and that's something that we've made possible with our policy, but also, to say again, paying by the mile really can make the difference. And I've heard it time and time again from customers on the phone saying that it's the difference between owning a car and not for them, because they have that level of control and they can say, I'm going to make that journey, but potentially for my weekly shop now, I'll have them deliver it to me. That's something that can actively make a difference to your monthly outgoings and really mean that you can still keep a car in the drive for the times that you do need it, but it doesn't have to be this continual hemorrhaging of cash, which is really, really important right now.
The additional pressures you're saying, kind of the microchip shortage and things like that, and the palladium. How long is a piece of string? But how long do we think these could be pressures on car insurance premiums and things like that?
It's hard to say. But I think what we're finding is, if it's not one thing, it's another. There are more and more factors driving up the prices of premiums kind of on a whole. And we'll see that. We'll see, more things being introduced. And, Faith mentioned the claims inflation. Really, we can do something about it as car insurers, or insurers in general. And actually, it all comes down to education. So if we can proactively go out to customers and prospective customers and educate them about how to drive safely. So, for example, when there's a storm coming, we'll send out an email to our members and we'll let them know a storm coming. Recommend that they don't drive if they can, afford not to, but if they have to, give them tips for how to drive safely. And we've seen a real impact actually on claims rate from these proactive education steps that we can do. We have, yeah, and we're just continuing to do that to sort of increase the education around how to drive more safely, because obviously that keeps people safer, and that's really the whole point. But actually it also has that added benefit of, if the claims inflation doesn't get so high because there's so many claims coming in across the industry, that brings down prices for people.
Aspects of these increasing claims is technology, and I guess how easy it is to commit crimes with these kind of newfangled cars with keyless entry and keyless theft, things like that. I mean, I've got an old Scenic, so these are kind of things are kind of lost on me. I'm not quite using a key to kind of turn in there. But what kind of role is technology playing on these kinds of claims today?
Oh, this is a really, really exciting part of doing this role. So what we've seen. In fact, we had a week not too long ago where we were able to recover 2 stolen vehicles thanks to the Buy Miles app, and thanks to the fact that by having our miles tracker in your car, we're able to see where the last journey ends. We're able to get in touch to that with that driver.
Find my phone almost.
Exactly that. Okay. So we know where that person has now dropped your car, and within minutes we were able to kind of mobilise the driver and the police to get those cars back. And this
fantastic.
Isn't a once in a while occurrence.
Yeah.
This was 2 in 2 days. So technology really can make the difference. And I know that there are ways, of course, that it's making it easier to commit crime, but as long as we're keeping up and we're paying attention, we can just as easily thwart those efforts as well. We recently sent out a batch of Faraday pouches to many of our drivers that do have keyless car entry, just so they can pop the keys in that at night. Immediately blocks the signal for these kind of like wireless, car stealing devices. I don't know. So that's a massive thing as well. There is a lot that we can be doing, and even specifically to kind of echo what Kirsty mentioned about the cost of a claim, it's incredible to see just how far telematics as a whole has gone, and how we can use it to support many of our drivers in kind of like proving the outcomes that they've spoken about. If you were driving at the time of an incident, if you were reversing and you'd like for us to advocate on your behalf and use the telematics that we do have access to, that's something that they can request. And we've seen many drivers have outcomes that are far better for them, especially when it comes to fault versus non-fault, because of the technology that currently sits in your car and is just not being tapped.
It's fantastic what technology can give us now and open up to everything. But I guess, do you have any pushback from customers in terms of putting telematics in there and kind of thinking, I'm being tracked, or Big Brother's watching me, anything like that? Is that still a barrier now?
It is, honestly, and I get it. I totally understand why people would think about that. And actually, if we look at some of the data leaks that there have been, or kind of very highly publicised misuses of personal data by companies, I totally appreciate why you would feel like that, and I think people should feel very protective over their own personal data. I think that's why, if you are using data, for example telematics data, you have to be entirely transparent with how you're using that, and how you're not going to use it, most importantly. So that's something we're really, really clear with for our customers.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking like, people got smart speakers in the houses now that are just figuring out things like that, people using Siri. So this technology is being used. It's not just exclusive to car insurance and things like that. But there are ways people can actually be rewarded and saved by kind of leveraging this technology, specifically with car insurance, right?
Absolutely. And it's purely about the access to kind of like the information that can then drive your decision making. It's not about saying that, automatically with this device plugged in, you'll save. It's still, you still have that level of control. And I think once drivers know that, they do drop that kind of anxiety around sharing their data. Also, it can feel really big. It can feel really scary. But, if you have an iPhone in your pocket, you have a kind of a running tracking device, and as consumers, we get more and more comfortable with sharing this data and trading that in service of convenience. And again, I think, speaking to what Kirsty mentioned, it really is all about that transparency, that choice, and that decision making. And once we have drivers making good decisions, those are drivers that are safer on the road, safer for themselves, safer for the wider public, and they're drivers who should ultimately have cheaper insurance, which is a win-win all around.
And people are just used to using apps like this all the time. Anything that kind of tracks metrics, how far you've gone, and things like that. You think people looking at smartwatches. Do you get people kind of really looking at, I've done 10 miles today, or I've done 20 miles today, and actually trying to almost self-compete with themselves to try and do less and less, maybe.
We do see that, and think of Strava. People, there's this kind of gamification element that we see, and we see people, sharing things on social as well, about how far they've driven, for example. And actually, it's nice that it's usually viewed through the lens of the competition to drive the fewest miles rather than the most. And I've had a Buy Miles policy as well, and the satisfaction of when you get an email or a push notification through telling you that you've driven 0 miles in a month, so your bill is 0,
Wow.
is really brilliant.
Yeah. So what kind of things kind of pop up in the app then, Faith? Like, what kind of metrics and stats have customers got access to?
So journey by journey, you're able to see your costs. You're able to see if you've had access to what we call our cost caps. So of course we know that every now and then a driver's going to want to make those longer journeys for those staycations. But what we do is cap the cost of that journey at 150 miles. So something that I know is really, really rewarding for people is for them to see that, while you may have driven 300 miles today on this kind of mega trip, you're only paying 150 of those, and in those kinds of things are kind of like massively impactful. But I will say, to echo what Kirsty said, there is nothing like receiving a zero sum statement and saying, wow, that's another month, I've nailed it. And really, really saying that, that there's nothing like that for our members, and they're very much impressed each and every time. So
it's a nice notification to get.
Absolutely.
You owe nothing.
Exactly that.
Right.
And I know some areas that they love, again, the Find My Car feature, where they are able to locate their car. Hopefully it's not been stolen. They may have just lost it in a car park, which is 9 times out of 10 that's exactly what it is.
Happens, yeah.
But that's massively helpful for them. And then we're also seeing people able, because we do have a car medic feature, which is a car diagnostics tool that, again, if you do have the policy type that uses the OBD-II socket, you're able to diagnose, kind of like small faults with your car. So again, it's about that ongoing maintenance that allows for you to, the education, the maintenance that allows you to keep your car in a more healthy state, hopefully avoid any incidents with your car, drive down the cost of even things like breakdown cover over time, because you're not having these huge issues. You're not having large garage bills, when you're able to very easily and very clearly feel empowered to go to a garage and say, I know exactly what the issue is. It's this. How can you help me? It's this. Yeah, I think people are often surprised by the value they get from that app and the things that they are able to track and see and gamify and speak to their friends about. It really is exciting to see, people grow to enjoy and use it in that way.
That's really interesting. That's really shifting the power. I think the word you used, the power of it, the empowering. So even going to mechanics where traditionally a lot of people kind of or feel like it's kind of lap of the gods. I'm going in there.
Yeah.
There's a noise with my car. It could be anything, and I feel like if I put it in there for one thing, it's all of a sudden there. Anything could be wrong with it. But also, I guess in terms of insurance in general, kind of the traditional model is you pay a premium, and you only kind of get in touch with the insurer again to either renew or make a claim for it all. So really shifting the balance of power with everything, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that's just not enough anymore. People are expecting more from insurance. If you're spending hundreds of pounds a year on a product, and all you're getting from it is just a few policy documents and the hope that someone will you'll get a payout from your insurer if you do have a claim or an accident, it's just not enough anymore. And actually, that's why we see such high engagement with our app features that Faith mentioned. People really, our customers really, really enjoy it and give us brilliant feedback about it. And that's a new thing as well. This kind of community that we've built out of our member base. Usually car insurance and insurance in general is a very low engagement product. It's sort of fire and forget. You buy it and then you don't think about it for a year. It's like a tax that you pay. But actually, if you can get so much more, if you can use it to, see how much in insurance it's going to cost you to do this specific journey, or you can use it to find where you've parked your car, because like me, sometimes you forget exactly which road you've parked it on and then run off and gone shopping, or you're checking the health of your car and seeing if there's any faults coming up. There's so much more that you could get from this hundreds of pounds that you're paying in premium. So I think it's so important to give people that control over their own driving, their own spending as well, and give them as much value as possible from that. And actually, the value exchange that you see is if you give people value through an app and they understand how allowing you as a company to use their data is delivering them benefits, they feel much more comfortable and they trust you. So it's all back into that trust element as well.
Much, I'd say much more value for money, getting a lot more back from it. And so buy miles are doing a lot of work, it seems, to make things a lot fairer for customers. What kind of responsibility do you think the government has for making things a lot fairer for drivers?
I think that's a really, really great question, because we have to understand that this is a shared responsibility. If we're talking about a cost of living crisis and we're talking about cutting costs for people overall, it has to be a joined up effort. So we know what we're doing as an insurance provider to help that. We know what the steps that other insurers need to be taking. But if we're talking about the government specifically, we know that 38% of drivers say a fuel duty cut would massively impact the affordability of driving for them. So that's a massive thing. Yeah. We again can speak about infrastructure and public transport. Making that more cost effective and accessible for larger populations of people means that choice between driving and taking an alternative option, of course, can be a choice that's more easily accessible to many, many people. We speak as two people that come from London, so we know that we are kind of drowning in options in some areas, and we feel really, really fortunate in that sense. But spreading out and making sure that every city, every town has access to safe, affordable and accessible for a myriad of people with different levels of ability, transport means that you're able to help them cut those costs. It's about these small steps that loads of different agencies can be taking and different kind of, companies can be taking with the aim of serving customers in a better way and serving essentially the population in a better way, because drivers aren't going anywhere. I'd say that's a huge one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to your point about serving the different needs of customers, something that we focused on at Buy Miles recently is to meet different budget needs, offering different payment structures. So this is really important. And actually, over the last few months, with the cost of living crisis, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of people who choose to pay on a monthly as opposed to a yearly basis.
Right.
And it's just a reflection of, how people are sort of struggling, and it's a bit more month to month than it was. And I think it's really important to offer that sort of payment structure. If you want to pay all in one go and then get the money for any miles that you didn't drive returned to you as a refund at the end of the year, you can do that. Or you can pay month to month. And if you would like to pay month to month, you can flex how much you pay up front and how much you pay month to month. It's really important, I think, when you're asking, for a premium, for example, for insurance, to give people this flexibility. And I think that's how you make services accessible to as many people as possible, and you make something a mass market product. Absolutely.
I think something we've had to do as a team, adjusting on the fly, as it were, because, as we can say, we mentioned that from May to now, we've seen a 20% jump in people scrutinising their bills and seeing where they can pull back some extra savings. These are people that are actively already in a policy with us. So they're beyond that stage of being able to make a decision up front about the policy they buy, and they're now living real time with a decision that they've made, and they are having to come to us and ask for adjustments to be made. There are people where they were able to quite comfortably afford their statements are now not so able to. So we really are having to make sure that we are keeping a really, really keen eye on customers who we deem to be vulnerable. It's a transient level of vulnerability, but it's about saying, what can we do to help? How far can we extend that period between, you not being able to make your payment or when you possibly can? Is it responsible to say, hey, if we get to this state, you may well owe 2 statements. What do you want to do about that? Is that a sustainable way of paying for you? Making decisions that are compassion-led, understanding that we're all going through this experience. The person that sat there on the other end of the phone with you, the consumer, really, really tough decisions are having to be made, but it's never nice to hear a person say, hey, if I pay this statement, I can't eat. The first thing we're going to say is go and buy your food. Let's figure out how we can adjust this. And hopefully when that pendulum swings back round and you are in a better space, you remember that this is a policy that you enjoyed, and you hopefully come back at some point in the future. I think the best part of any crisis is people banding together and remembering that we'll have a myriad of different issues, but letting compassion lead in your processes is a massive thing, because everybody's a human being and your need for a car will be different from person to person. So taking people in as individuals and seeing what we can do to help will always be the biggest focus for us.
That's an incredible amount of flexibility within there. I think the compassion is a very strong word in that. I mean, I think if anyone tried to get out of a phone contract earlier, anything like that, it's, a contract's like a contract kind of thing. But especially when there's so many different mitigating circumstances within this kind of cost of living crisis and the additional pressures on there, people's circumstances change weekly, on a weekly basis. So to have that level of the flex and agility with everything is that's what's really going to kind of drive the change with everything. Well, thank you very much. We have run out of time on that one, Kirsty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Faith, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So that's it for now. For more insights on these topics, be sure to check out the content on our blog, on our magazine at bymiles.co.uk. Tell us what you think on Twitter. Get involved in the conversation on there, Facebook and LinkedIn as well. We are at bymiles. We're also at gobymiles on Instagram. So until next time, drive safe, drive smart, drive change.